On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
My name's Mike Putchell.
Tonight's episode is The Bubbler Did It. In part because it almost appears that this whole story of a bubbler was sort of invented by the police, in particular Randy Winkler. So Kutzka had drawn Kellner an illustration of where each of the men had been in Coop 9. They did not leave to confront Monfils, though. They just went back to work after hearing the tape played. So this is important because we're getting to a point in the story where how did the Monfils 6 get convicted? And a lot of it comes down to the events around the bubbler, and in particular these illustrations that were being drawn by people, some of the people who weren't even there, and this whole sort of manufactured sort of episode of what may or may not have happened at the bubbler. The authors state that Kellner was just transposing various accounts he had heard over the 2 years and then melding them into one. Did you get that impression, Mike, that that's what Kellner was doing?
I got an impression that he was kind of just certainly going along with what Winkler said. I think he was just wanting to agree with him to be easy to work with in the interview, not viewed as combative, and I really think that we'll go into it a little bit more later, but I really do think he just wanted to get out of that interrogation room.
Now, there's a photo within the book of Brian Kellner having won, I believe it's a walleye competition, sponsored through the mill. What, in particular, and this photo will be on the Instagram page as well. What does the photo strike you, Mike, in terms of what Brian Kellner is like?
When I saw that picture and the fact that it was for an award for Kellner catching the largest walleye at the mill fishing contest, it just kind of further solidified what I said way back, I think in one of the first couple episodes, that this is like a true Wisconsin story, because that's the kind of stuff that they do up in that area. They have these fishing contests, and that's the impression I got. I looking at the photos or looking at this picture, I don't get really any impression of Kellner himself. What do you think?
The impression I got was that my initial impression was that rather low intelligence, to be frank.
Is there something specific about him that makes you say that?
I guess it's the look in his eyes.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to see what the listeners think when they see the photo on the thumbnail. 'Cause yeah, I mean, I don't get that just from a photo, but I can see, why you would get that impression. I get it more from just the stuff that goes on with the interrogation, which we'll talk about more today.
Yeah, the reason I state that is that much of this case and the convictions hinge on Brian Kellner and his testimony, and his drawings. And I think that Winkler, during 2 days that he's interviewing, Kellner sort of realizes that he's got someone that sort of can be duped. And this is the person that he's going to hook in. And he's found someone that's going to go along with this. So Kutzka did not get a hold of the autopsy report until August of 1994. This is important because the events of the Fox Den took place during the 4th of July weekend of 1994. So, again, up until this point, Kutzka still thinks that basically Monfils had committed suicide until he had read the autopsy report. So in this case, if that's really the case, then everything that Kellner says about the Fox Den must have been wrong, right?
Yeah, there's certainly an inconsistency here with the time frame as far as what Keith knew, like you said, in July.
So during the 2-day interview, again, this would have been November 29th and November 30th of 1994, about 5 months after the events that supposedly that took place at the Fox Den. Winkler was able to get Kellner to produce 3 drawings that actually these drawings were used at the trial. But what's important about these drawings is that the drawings that Kellner produced were actually drawings that Kutzka had drawn for Kellner. And where Kutzka got the drawings actually came from the 1-year anniversary news piece that appeared in the Green Bay Gazette from illustrator Joe Heller. So in these illustrations from Joe Heller, he admits that he got the illustration ideas from the police themselves. So why is that important?
Well, to me, it shows you that everybody's getting these drawings from somebody else. Like, it's just this chain of kind of like telephone, but with the drawings. You know, Heller gets them from the police, which of course is the police's theory of the whole killing or death. And then Kutzka's just reiterating the drawings to Kellner in the bar, and then Kellner's reiterating those drawings to Winkler. So it's kind of like the telephone game where I'm sure the drawings probably changed as it goes from another person, the next person to another.
And then the illustrations that Kellner draws out are used in the trial. So, and again, the original or these drawings originated with the police and their theory. So of course that's all going to work out so well for the police like that. So now we're getting to the heart of what went wrong with this jury trial. So according to Kellner, there were actually 4 other people present at the bubbler when Monfils was confronted. To this day, all those extra 4 people deny that the bubbler incident occurred. So these extra 4 people, why don't you think that the police were interested in them?
Well, I guess they just weren't the core 6 that they had their mind set on. They weren't associated with, they couldn't be tied to Kutzka, because Kutzka was kind of the centerpiece, and then the other 5 were surrounding him.
What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that, your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
So at the end of the 2-day interview, Winkler told Kellner that he prefers that Kellner not tell Kutzka about the Verstraete tapes. Why do you think he did not want Kutzka to know about the Verstraete tapes?
I'm not 100% sure on his motives for all of that. All I know is that Winkler throughout these interrogations has been playing games with people, playing mind games, seeing what people will do. Because like later on, we'll talk about how when he interviewed another employee, he told him not to mention the interrogation, and the guy did anyway. And I think Winkler just liked to see how people reacted to these interrogations, which in his mind may have proven some level of involvement or what they really might know. I think he was just always playing mind games with these people.
I tend to think possibly one of the reasons is that Winkler's aware that Kutzka's sort of a sharp mind, and that if Kutzka finds out that he had been recording by the Verstraetes, the first thing he's gonna say is, "I didn't tell them anything," and then Kellner might figure out that he'd been duped. So that's possibly. Kutzka's definitely much more intelligent than Kellner, that's for sure. So Kellner left the interview. This would have been on the November 30th, 1994 at 12:15, not knowing what he had just done. And he told the authors that Winkler had used him. Kellner said he just wanted to leave. And a lot of experts in wrongful convictions believe a statement must be signed for them to leave an interview. So this kind of gets back to our previous episode when you stated, Mike, why didn't Kellner just get up and walk during the interview?
Yeah, I mean, I really see it as unfortunate the way Kellner handled a lot of this. I don't really understand where he said, he doesn't know what he did. That part I kind of find a little weird, just because if I'm him, I'm sitting there, I'm being interrogated for 2 days. I'm being asked to implicate my friend, Keith. I don't get how he wouldn't understand what Winkler's trying to get him to do. I mean, clearly he was trying to get him to implicate Kutzka, and I would think he would have known that whatever he signed off on would really be, I don't know if he knew it would be the key, as Zukowski calls it, but I'm sure he should have known that this would be a big break in the case, and it would be damning evidence for Kutzka and the other 5. So that part I find hard to understand. But yeah, like I said in the previous episode, I do get how he felt intimidated. I do think there is a big element that really isn't touched on in the book at all, but this is just my own theory, that Kellner and his wife, who was later interrogated as well, I really just think that a lot of this came from a respect for law enforcement, that they have these values where you don't question authority, and you kind of go along with what they say, even though in this case they didn't really know what they were doing.
I could buy that. Definitely in sort of Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the early '90s, that people, there wasn't the idea that you would argue with a police officer, right, or a detective. So each of the illustrations that Kellner drew were wrong regarding Coop 7, Coop 9, and the bubbler incident. So there was something wrong with each of them. People were drawn at different places that they shouldn't have been. So some of the people in the drawings should have been at work when Kellner draws them into the illustrations. And they could not have been there where Kellner alleges that they were. So not only these illustrations that are ultimately coming from the police, the ones that Kellner drew, and that were used in court, there was errors with each of them. The next day on December 1st, Winkler interviews John Menu, as Menu had been placed at the bubbler by Kellner. So Menu is one of the four that was not charged. At the time, Menu said that he felt as though Monfils had killed himself. Winkler then showed Menu that Kellner had drawn him into the Coop 9 illustration, but suggested that he had played a minor role so that he could exonerate himself. Menu even suggested that he would go through hypnosis to try to recall things that he could not remember. So what do you think what's going through his mind when Kellner shows him the Coop 9 illustration and he's drawn into it?
Well, I think he was probably pretty freaked out because he points out, and we know that employees at the mill were asked to, and actually they weren't asked, they were really threatened to cooperate with police. So I think he was in some ways trying to bend over backwards to make the police happy.
This is true. Yeah. What did you think about the aspect of him suggesting that he would go through hypnosis to recall things that he could not remember?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just kind of a extreme example of the cooperation that he's offering. I don't even think, though, isn't hypnosis not even admissible in court? Like when you put somebody under hypnosis, isn't what they say not admissible? I thought I remembered that.
I'm going to go, I think that you're right. I don't know that that's true, but I would think that it would be considered pretty unreliable. It's just, to me, that strikes me the fact that he wants to go, or says he'll go through hypnosis, is that he's very, very scared at this point, and he'll say anything to get him out of the situation, basically. So Winkler wrote in his detail sheet that Menu did not say the bubbler story was wrong, just that he couldn't recall it happening like that. And as you pointed out, Menu didn't want to argue with Winkler, as the mill managers had told the employees to cooperate with the investigation. Winkler also wanted illustrations from Menu, and he produced two, both of which contradicted the illustrations of Kellner. So everyone's drawing pictures at this point, and it seems like everyone's contradicting themselves in the photos. What does that say to you just about what happened in general?
Well, I think this would be the point where if you had solid police work going on, you'd say, okay, I'm going the wrong way here, if you're Winkler. But that's not the case.
Yeah, this kind of shows you, the book really emphasized the fact that once Kellner had signed that confession, that the next 2 weeks Winkler was sort of working his butt off as far as trying to get everything to sort of fit into place. And so he sees the window of opportunity, and he's going for it. He thinks he really at this point believes that he can get these convictions. So at this point, then on the next day, he goes and interviews. This would be December 2nd, 1994, around 9 a.m. He interviews Verna Kellner, saying Kutzka had confessed and that he did not want to ask her to go to the John Doe hearing if she talked to him, and she agreed. Winkler also said that he knew about their affair between Kutzka and Verna. Why do you think everyone's so freaked out about this John Doe hearing?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about that in the past, and I think the main thing, my impression here, why people don't want to be involved in this is I actually just think they don't want to go to court. I really just think they don't want to have to take time out of their lives to go through and get dragged through what could be kind of a long, drawn-out proceeding. Do you know of another reason?
I would imagine the fear that they might get caught in a contradiction when they're under oath.
Yeah, that too as well.
Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite, as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. Mike, can you tell the story of what recently happened to you?
Sure. So, we talk about Seasons of Life Memorials on this podcast and what it can do for everybody. And I personally in my life, this is something going on right now where I would use Seasons of Life Memorial services. As of this recording date, last Wednesday, the 3rd of July, my uncle passed away, and the funeral's going to be this coming Friday, the 12th. So we're preparing for that, and we're seeing that he was the type that really never took a lot of photos, and from a media standpoint, we don't have a lot to really remember him. Of course, we'll have our memories in our minds, and that we can share with each other, with other family members. But as far as, maybe wanting to revisit photographs or show younger family members, kids who haven't known him as long as I have, or as long as my older family members, we don't have much to show them. We don't have those photos, and so it's kind of just an example of one, how important it is, to document and take photos that you can then either, whether it be put them up through the social media channels like the Instagram page that we can create, or even going further than that, putting them into a memorial video. These things will last, really as long as the internet's around. So longer than physical photographs last. And again, as we've pointed out in the past, these videos and the online media, if you just do the social media page, you don't have to worry about physical copies being lost forever, like to flood damage or fire damage, or just losing them. Maybe if you moved, or just losing track of where they are. Plus, that way too, another thing, when you have the video, anybody can look at it. Whereas with a photograph, sometimes you might only have like one copy, and family members, I know you can make copies of photographs, but usually the original's the best looking one. And when you have a video as the medium, anybody can look at it. You can have as many copies of it as you want. So, just giving an example right now of what I'm going through in my life with how Seasons of Life Memorials really can come into play.
And we're back. Winkler told Verna Kellner that he did not want to play her the Verstraete tapes, but wanted her to state what was on the tapes instead. This gets back to what we were talking about earlier in the episode with me suggesting that maybe Brian Kellner wasn't the sharpest guy in the world. And he probably has a wife that's not the sharpest, wife in the world. Because it just seems like he's found the perfect people to dupe Winkler here, and he's duping them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think Winkler was really good at reading people. Yeah, that I will give him credit for. I think he really was good at kind of getting an idea of, I guess you could call it intelligence. I don't know if I'd call it intelligence, though. I think he really kind of got to know people's weaknesses, what he could use against them. And that's what he did with Kellner and Verna, like with the affair. The thing I don't understand, though, about Verna, they weren't having an affair, her and Keith. And what I don't understand about that is when Winkler kind of alludes to a relationship between her and Keith, I don't understand why she doesn't just say, that's ludicrous. That's what I don't get. And, maybe it's the intelligence thing you're talking about. I would say it's maybe, I think people they really just didn't want to get wrapped up in this. So they just agreed.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought up the point of Winkler finding a person's weak spots. From what I've read on people who could be considered psychopaths or sociopaths, they sort of have that ability. That's, what they have, they're able to do. And so it almost makes you wonder what Winkler's psychological makeup was like. So had Verna or Brian asked to listen to the tapes, they would have discovered that there was nothing on them. Or what was on them was very minimal. Kutzka came over to the Kellners after the reading the autopsy. This would have been August of 94, and stated that he now knew that Monfils had been murdered after reading it. He stated that Monfils was first kicked in the testicles and then hit over the head. What would give you pause as to Kutzka making that declaration that he knew that Monfils had been murdered at that point?
What are you alluding to there? Are you pointing to the screwed up timeline with the Fox Den, or what are you getting at?
I'm getting at the blades at the bottom of the pulp vat.
Right, yeah. Well, we've talked before about how the autopsy was kind of screwed up. You're referring to how do they know that he was hit in the back of the head with a weapon? I mean, it could have been the blade.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Also, Monfils, again, his legs were taken off, and he had been wearing steel-tip boots. And so those steel-tip boots were being, whirled around at 200 RPM. Those boots could have kicked him in the testicles, right?
Yeah, this was the only time we heard about that with the testicles, right? I don't remember reading about that in the autopsy section. Do you?
I do not know. So maybe that was, it's possible that's Kutzka's interpretation of what happened.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you could even know if he was kicked there prior to being thrown in the vat or, getting in the vat versus if it was an injury sustained after getting in the vat. I don't know how that could be known.
The other thing that's kind of interesting is like these are grown men. How many grown men do you know of that kick each other in the testicles?
I don't know. I don't know. That didn't really cross my mind. I don't know.
I don't know if you know that. I've known this from listening to behind the scenes things in the NFL. But the NFL players, they don't wear. Hardly any of them wear cups for protection, and the reason is that there is just a unwritten rule that you would never do that. You would never, as a player, attempt to kick someone else in the testicles. That just they're not going to do that. And I kind of apply that just to adult men in general. That because you can cause someone to go sterile if they're hit hard enough.
Yeah.
So everything Verna said was hearsay, as the authors point out, because she did not work in the mill. Everything she signed off on had been placed in front of her on a piece of paper by Winkler. And despite all this, Verna did not confirm that a killing took place at the Bubbler. So again, everything sort of comes down to these illustrations and this sort of vague notion that Monfils was attacked by the Bubbler. But again, a lot of these can be traced back. These illustrations can be traced back to the police themselves. So we're starting to see how this happened. Verna stated that the Coop 9 guys had wanted to trap Tommy Monfils by the Bubbler or Booth and admit his guilt so that he would just quit his job. But then after they had confronted him, they all went back to work shortly after Monfils was reported missing. So Verna's account ends with the men going back to work after the confrontation, and this contradicts Brian Kellner's story and thus undermines the entire account of the Fox Den. So if what Verna is saying is true and what Brian Kellner is stating, there is a direct contradiction in what happened. So it would appear that this whole Fox Den theory is pretty weak to begin with and probably should have never been held up in the court as the main reason that convicted the Monfils Six. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I would agree with you with everything you just said. That was the key, right? This is Zukowski's key.
Yeah, this was Zukowski's key as far as getting them all convicted. What are your thoughts on if you were Zukowski and you were presented this? Would you have gone along with it?
If I was Zukowski, yeah, because I know that my job is to convict people. I wouldn't do it, but if I was Zukowski, if I was in that position, yeah, I would. I would try my best to use that evidence to get a conviction. And so I get why he did it. And remember, too, he also had the re-election coming up, so you want to make it look like you're doing a real good job for the county. So I can see why he did it. I don't like it, but I can understand it.
New episodes of the Monfils 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? Would you like all of the world to view what their life had been about? Seasons of Life Memorials is what you are looking for. We create individual and unique documentary shorts that will allow anyone visiting the gravesite to view the documentary and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today to set up an appointment at seasonsoflifememorials.com.